This is the Fulltone OCD, or rather 8 of them. Now, it's not uncommon for an overdrive to have a couple of versions over the years, but with the exception of the Big Muff, I'm unable to think of any other overdrive that has had 8 versions. It's not like the Fulltone OCD has changed over the years because of part unavailability or moving production from one world power to another. No. The Fulltone OCD is still made where it's always been made, still by the same company, still by the same guy, Mike Fuller, Fulltone. Yeah, they've gotten a bit bigger, and when the first one came out, it was sort of a different world in the world of guitar, but the Fulltone OCD stands out among other overdrives in that over its 12-year existence, Fulltone has released 8 different versions of this pedal, even if they themselves claim they didn't. Trust me, they really did. To understand the OCD, you've got to go back to when it was released. The year is 2005, and the guitar world is not at all like it is today. The internet is not at all like it is today. This is a world with no iPhones, no Facebook. YouTube is only about a year old. So how did we find out about pedals? Well, if you were a pedal geek like myself, you took to about 2 sites on the internet. The Gear Page or Harmony Central. Remember them? I think they might still be around. The OCD was birthed in a time when boutique pedal manufacturers were more concerned with how do we make a fuzz face clone that cleans up just like Hendrix used to, rather than how do we make an Uber delay or a transparent overdrive. The idea of first and second gain stage overdrive pedals hadn't come into fashion yet. Enter OCD version 1.1. This was the definitive Marshall-in-a-box overdrive pedal. Amp-like touch sensitivity, neutral mid-range, low lows, and high highs. This thing sounded awesome. And they made about 4,500 of them, until they decided it needed some more mid-range. Enter version 1.2. More mid-range, softer highs, little less low end, and they changed the volume pot from 100 to 500K. No big deal. Until they decided even more mid-range was needed, and they changed the drive pot from 500K to 1 meg. This thing had so much mid-range, so much sustain, the tone pot seemed to have a little more in the sweep, it almost sounded like a mini tube screamer was built in. At this point, someone decided, let's really have some fun. Enter version 1.4. Let's add a germanium diode to the clipping section. Let's replace the volume pot with a logarithmic pot. Let's decrease the op amp and tone capacitors to have lower bass response. They changed the LED color from red to blue, and somehow pulled out even more harmonics, pulled back the low end, and gave us more control over the volume. Enter version 1.5 and 1.6. Now here's where the story gets good, because nobody at Fulltone really acknowledges that there was a 1.5 and a 1.6. In fact, Mike Fuller was even quoted as saying, there's only 4 versions of the OCD, and version 4 is the latest. And yet if you open up the pedals, they say 1.5 and 1.6. Later on, you're going to get to judge whether those 5 and 6 versions actually sound different. Now, it's interesting to note that even on versions labeled 1.5 and 1.6 in Sharpie, they're still built on the 1.4 circuit board, and so 1.4 is printed on the circuit board. Now enter version 1.7. Let's forget for a fact that some of the early version 1.7s were printed on old 1.4 circuit boards, but Fulltone not only marks 1.7 in Sharpie on the inside of the casing, but they eventually get a new circuit board labeled OCD V1.7. So I guess in the end they kind of do acknowledge there was a 1.5 and a 1.6 in a sort of roundabout way. And finally, version 2. Not to be confused with version 1.2. This version 2 is acknowledged by Fulltone. It's the latest version, and it is very different from all the others. In terms of the mid-range, it's something like a version 1.2 or 1.3. Very aggressive, honky, mid-range sounding overdrive box. And the circuit is different, completely different. The layout's different, the enclosure is different. This features a true bypass and enhanced bypass switch, where you can now choose if you'd like to add a buffer back into the signal. Okay, enough talking. Let's hear these OCDs in action, lined up in a real A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H test. We started with all the knobs at the same positions, and because of pot value changements over time, we're going to have to adjust those to make sure the volume gets all up to the same level. Enjoy! Okay, so for me, 1.1, 1.2, 1.4 is definitely my favorite. 1.7 is pretty cool too. I think if you're looking for a transparent, lower gain type of thing, 1.1 is really transparent in the mid-range, and it cleans up pretty nice. It's really nice feel. That's a really killer pedal if you're looking for a first or second stage gain kind of pedal and you want to run it low. If you want a little more mid-range, kind of a little more typical Marshall in a box, something just to really get your clean amp soaring, I'd say OCD 1.2 is my favorite for that. 1.3 to me, really good lead stuff, but in terms of rhythm, there's a little too much honkiness there for me. 1.4 is definitely the squishiest in feel. That's my favorite OCD. I've been playing that for a while, and that is just killer to me. I will say 1.5, very similar to 1.4. I mean, there's some real debate over whether there were circuit changes in that or not. 1.6, the volume pot was definitely different on the model I have here. It was lower and more like what 1.7 is. 1.7 is sort of a different animal altogether. Definitely different than 1.4 and the previous models. 1.2, I'm sorry, actually version 2, the real version 2, not 1.2, but the latest one, version 2, feels kind of like they're trying to add more mid-range again like they did previously in versions 1.2 and 1.3. Ugh, are you OCD'd out? I'm not. I love these pedals. And that's why I needed to get all 8 together here. Hey, if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe. My name is HW, and thank you so much for watching Tone Junkie TV. One more thing to note, I did reach out to Mike Fuller, and all I got was his voicemail, and it said he would be back after the holidays and after he was done completing OCD version 2.1. So, take that for what it's worth. HW, out.